online, the secretary of the committee, and our legal team. This is the judgment in the matter of the Electoral Code of Conduct set out in the second schedule to the Elections Act, Cap 7 Laws of Kenya, and the Honorable David Gikaria, the respondent. Judgment. The respondent, the Honorable David Gikaria, member of the National Assembly for Nakuru Town East constituency, was summoned to appear before the Electoral Code of Conduct Enforcement Committee, which we shall refer to as committee from here, to answer to allegations of alleged breach of the Electoral Code of Conduct arising from the utterances made at a public rally in Olkalau, Nyandarua County on the 6th July 2026, I beg your pardon. Ahead of the by-election, which was scheduled for 16th July 2026, in respect of the Olkalau constituency parliamentary seat. This was in relation to a video clip widely circulated both on the mainstream and social media depicting the honorable member addressing jubilant members of the public at Mirangine Ward, Olkalau constituency, Nyandarua County, in the course of outreach activities ahead of the 16th July 2026 parliamentary by-election. The two strands of conduct are addressed below. A, the respondent's own account of the distribution of substantial sums of cash to persons attending the rally and of the amounts involved. B, the respondent's remarks to the gathering that an identification document or ID was not required to vote. Ladies and gentlemen, please excuse me. We must put counsel on record. Sorry, I think you walked in when I had already introduced. Please introduce yourself.
Chair, for the purposes of this particular proceedings, my name is Mike Ombongi. I appear for the respondent.
Thank you, counsel. So, the in-band conduct and remarks, the distribution of money. The respondent is recorded in his own voice addressing the rally in the following terms. Lakini mimi nilikuwa na 250 ya mikutano ya jana. Watu wakajaa. I had to go home and get another 800,000. Jana peke yake hapa kwenu nilitumia 1,200,000. Si niliwaambia mimi nimepewa 250,000. Hiyo ni ya jana, si ndio? Leo nimepewa another 250,000. On a plain reading, the respondent states that he disbursed, the word nilitumia means I used or I spent, a total of Kenya shillings 1.2 million at the rally the previous day alone, having returned home to source for a further 800,000 after his initial Kenya shillings 250,000 was exhausted by the turnout, and that he had on the day of the rally itself been furnished with a further 250,000 shillings for the same purpose. Identification documents remarks. The respondent is further recorded in the certified electronic evidence before the committee addressing residents in the following terms. Ulipiga kura, sivyo? Kuna kitambulisho ilikuwa inaitishwa. Hakuna kitambulisho ilikuwa ikiitishwa. Mtu alikuwa akifanya nini? Unaweka kidole. Kama ID haiitishwi, unatumia kidole. Ufike ujiwekee kidole. Hakuna ID, hautaitishwa ID. The video record discloses further material that situates these remarks within a live contested exchange and confirms the practice underlying them. At minute 3:17 seconds of the video clip, the respondent poses the question, kuna kitambulisho ilikuwa ikiitishwa kwa kupiga kura? To which an audience member responds, yes. The respondent, the Honorable Gikaria, presses on. Wapi? Then he proceeds to dismiss the attendee with the words, wewe haukupiga kura. An indication that the Honorable member's motive was to reinforce his remarks that the ID was not required. The respondent further states, kama ID haitishwi, unatumia kidole, alafu mnasema watu wanaitisha ID wakaibe kura. Kuna kidole ya mtu itakatwa, alafu mimi niende nikawekelee. Haiwezekani. The respondent's reassurance to the gathering that identification is dispensable and that biometric verification alone suffices is a misrepresentation that contradicts the requirement under Section 10, subsection 1 of the Elections Act and its regulations that a voter produces a valid identification document at the polling station. The evidence before this committee. The complainant, who in this respect is the secretary to the committee and the prosecutor in this matter, during the hearing, she was able to present to the committee oral submissions highlighting the identified breach of the code. In her submissions, she stated that the respondent, the Honorable David Gikaria, is not just an ordinary citizen. He is a prominent office bearer, a recognized political leader, and a member of parliament for Nakuru Town East constituency. By virtue of his position, he owes the highest duty of fidelity, honesty, and integrity to the public, the people whom he represents, and in this case, the people of Olkalau. Instead, during a recent campaign rally in Olkalau, the Honorable David, the accused in this case, chose to weaponize his influence. He stood before a vulnerable electorate and willfully, maliciously spread flagrant falsehoods designed to disenfranchise voters while simultaneously boasting of using financial muscle on the innocent and not so trusting members of the public. In support of her submissions, she presented the following material as evidence before this committee. A, an audio-visual clip of the remarks broadcast by the Citizen Digital, Citizen TV Kenya on the 7th of July 2026, and which is accessible at the provided link, titled, MP David Gikaria explains to Olkalau residents why he demands IDs before giving handouts. B, a digital forensic report prepared by the Kenya Computer Incident Response Team Coordination Center, domiciled at the Communications Authority of Kenya, confirming the source, the broadcaster, and the date of the video. And C, a certificate of electronic evidence dated the 10th of July 2026, certifying the integrity of the electronic evidence. So what is the respondent's case? That is the Honorable David Gikaria's response. The respondent was represented by learned counsel Michael Ombongi, who made oral submissions. In his submissions, he outlined that the respondent was not served with a particular video clip produced by the secretary and played before the committee. He further stated that the respondent was not supplied with the transcriptions of the said video clip, and as such, it was his assumption that the prosecution only relied on documentary evidence. Regarding the contents of the video, he asserted that there was no evidence that money changed hands and that the speech was in itself an offer in exchange for them attending any particular gathering or meeting. Additionally, learned counsel asserted that there was no evidence that any voter was promised an award for voting in a certain way. It was his contestation, the Learned Counsel, that the forensic report produced before the committee merely authenticated the video. I repeat and emphasize, merely authenticated the video, but did not prove that the respondent committed bribery. In conclusion, he claimed that the committee relied on its own interpretation of the words uttered by the respondent, which he argued were taken out of context. In rejoinder, the prosecutor said that the complainant stated that the report was duly served upon the respondent and that the same was only meant to show authenticity of the electronic evidence as required by Section 106B(4) of the Evidence Act. She further added that the words in the video were spoken in the national language, that is Kiswahili, and as such, it did not require transcription at all. D, the issues for determination. From the foregoing, the following issues arise for our determination. A, whether the respondent's remarks claiming he had distributed money to persons attending his rallies and that he had more contravened paragraph 6H of the code. B, whether the respondent's remarks he had distributed money to persons attending his rallies and that he had more constituted an abuse of his position for political purposes, contrary to paragraph 6(1) of the code. And C, whether the respondent's identification document remarks constituted an abuse of the position of the respondent for political purposes, contrary to paragraph 6(1) of the code. And so, issue 1, whether the respondent's remarks claiming he had distributed money and that he had more contravene paragraph 6, the code commits every candidate under paragraph 6H to refrain from offering any document or reward to any person in consideration, that is in exchange, of such person, among others, attending or not attending any political event. 23, paragraph. The respondent's own account set out at paragraphs 4 and 5 above is a direct, public, first-person statement of large-scale cash disbursement. It was his own admission that the cash was distributed at political events which he attended across the constituency. This committee is aware of the Kenyan political landscape. It is particularly aware of the behavior of some Kenyans where money is mentioned, as well as the Kenyan culture of associating politics and what is ordinarily called handouts. Being a politician, and when the committee infers from his remarks, it is obvious that the respondent is also aware of this fact and was using it to lure people, to attract people, to attend political events where he drummed up support for his preferred candidate in the upcoming by-election. The committee finds that Honorable David Gikaria is culpable of breach of paragraph 6H of the code. The second issue as to whether the Honorable David Gikaria's remarks claiming that he had disputed money and that he had more to distribute constituted an abuse of his position for political purposes, contrary to paragraph 6(1) of the code. Paragraph 6(1) of the code commits every candidate to refrain from any attempt to abuse a position of power, privilege, or influence for political purposes, including any offer or reward. The provision targets the deployment of standing, office, or advantage, rather than any specific category of statement, and its reach extends to the manner in which a candidate's authority is used, wherever that use serves a political end. The meaning of the word abuse in this context can be defined as the wrongful or improper exercise of a power or position to confer a benefit upon oneself or upon others. On this footing, conduct that trades on the authority of public office to secure or safeguard an advantage through statements that the office holder has reason to know that they misstate, misrepresent the true position, amounts to an abuse of that office, irrespective of whether the advantage secured takes a pecuniary, that is financial, or a purely electoral form. The term political purpose may be understood in relevant part as any activity undertaken in support of or in opposition to the election or nomination of a candidate to public office. This formulation accords with the treatment in comparative electoral integrity practice of abuse of official position as the deployment of the powers, privileges, and standing attaching to a public office to advance the electoral interests of a particular candidate or a particular political party. In sum, in total, that is, a political purpose is present wherever an act, whatever its surface content, is directed and influencing the conduct, perception, or compliance of an electorate, or at protecting or advancing a candidate's electoral standing ahead of a poll. The distribution of funds, which the respondent himself admits to doing, constitutes an abuse of his position under paragraph 6, Roman 1. It was the respondent's office, his standing as a sitting member of the National Assembly, and consequent capacity to convene, resource, and finance a rally of the scale described that permitted the disbursement scheme described at paragraphs 4 and 5 above. The financing and orchestration of that scheme is the deployment of the office, access to resources, and standing that only an incumbent legislator can command and commands. For the purpose of mobilizing and securing electoral support ahead of the by-election within the meaning of political purpose as set above. For the above stated reasons, this committee finds that the Honorable David Gikaria is culpable of breach of paragraph 6, Roman 1 of the Code in respect of the distribution of money, independently of and in addition to the finding at issue number 1 above. Issue number 3 for our determination as to whether the respondent's remarks regarding the identification document constituted an abuse of his position for political purposes. Section 10, subsection 1 of the Elections Act, Cap 7, provides that a person whose name and biometric data are entered in a register of voters at a particular polling station and who produces an identification document, underlined, who produces an identification document, shall be eligible to vote at that polling station. Accordingly, the statutory voting process requires both production of an acceptable identification document, which is either a national identity card or a valid Kenyan passport, and then a biometric verification. Biometric verification does not operate as a statutory substitute or replacement for production of an identification document. To prove a breach of paragraph 6(1) of the Code, this committee finds that it is important to consider 3 elements. A, whether the respondent occupied a position of power, privilege, or influence. B, whether the respondent's conduct amounted to an abuse of that position of influence. And C, whether that abuse was for a political purpose. Position of power, privilege of influence. The respondent is the sitting member of parliament for Nakuru Town East. He is a leader and a person of influence, not only in his own constituency, but within the region of Olkalau included and the country at large. So that answers the question of whether or not the Honorable Gikaria occupied the position of power, privilege, or influence at the time when he made the remarks. Regarding abuse of the position of influence, the deference, that the respects and awe normally or customarily extended to a sitting legislator, placed the Honorable Gikaria in a position of considerable influence over the residents who were assembled at the rally where he was addressing. Deploying that influential position, the Honorable Gikaria proceeded to offer the rally attendees a representation on the ID requirement, which misstates and misrepresents the position under the Elections Act and the attendant regulations. The use of his influence to press such misrepresentation of that kind in order to say the preferred candidate constitutes an abuse of that position within the meaning of paragraph 6(1). As to whether the Honorable Member of Parliament of Nakuru Town East used those remarks for political purpose, the remarks served the specific end of drumming up support for his preferred candidate. This falls squarely within the definition of a political purpose, as set above. Therefore, all three elements have been established, and this committee finds, on the totality of the evidence adduced, that the respondent's remarks on the identification requirement amount to an abuse of his position of power, privilege, and influence as a member of the National Assembly deployed for a political purpose in breach of paragraph 6, subparagraph 1 of the Electoral Code of Conduct, independently of and in addition to the finding in issue number 2 above. And this is the determination of this committee. The committee finds that the Honorable David Gikaria, member of the National Assembly for Nakuru Town East constituency, is culpable of breaching A, paragraph 6H of the Code by reason of his claims that he distributed cash as established in issue number 1 above. B, paragraph 6(1) of the Code by reason of the same cash distribution claims, which independently amount to an abuse of his position and influence as a member of the National Assembly for political purpose, as established at issue number 2 above. Code separately and in to the people assembled before him that identification documents were not required to vote, an abuse of his position and influence for political purposes as found and established in issue number 3 above. In each case, in respect of the conduct and utterances at the public rally in Olkalau and Darua County. This determination is consistent with the jurisprudence of the Supreme Court of Kenya in the case of Wetangula and another versus Combo and 5 others, 2015, KLR, where the court affirmed that improper inducement strikes at the heart of electoral integrity and undermines the constitutional requirement that elections be free and fair. These, then, are the orders of this committee. The committee, having considered all the submissions and authenticated digital evidence, and found that the Honorable Gikaria is culpable on all 3 counts, and in the exercise of its powers under the Code, orders as follows. 1. That the respondent, the Honorable David Gikaria, is hereby issued a severe formal warning to cease and desist forthwith and forever from making statements that imply financial inducement or reward to the electorate. 2. That the respondent, the Honorable David Gikaria, is hereby issued a severe formal warning to cease and desist forthwith from making any further misleading statements regarding the statutory voting requirements which require an ID as part of the requirement. 3, that the Honorable Gikaria shall issue a public retraction and apology on Wednesday, 15th July 2026 at 10 a.m. at Anniversary Towers Boardroom, where we are seated, that is tomorrow, before the public and to the people of Olkalau and the country, undertaking that that was wrong and that shall not be repeated. That the authenticated video, another order, evidence presented before this committee be referred to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions to investigate potential offenses under the Election Offences Act. If established, the said Honorable David Gikaria be prosecuted criminally under the law. Order number 5, that the Honorable David Gikaria is hereby condemned to pay a fine of Kenya shillings 2.5 million within 48 hours of this determination. And finally, that failure to comply with these orders will attract further sanctions that will include, but will not be limited to, barring the Honorable David Gikaria from participating in any further electoral activity conducted and supervised by this commission. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of our orders. Thank you for your presence. Question? Go ahead.
They don't have questions.
So, without any... Yes, please? Did you raise your hand? Good. So without any question from the media, we are happy. My apologies. Counsel.
On behalf of the respondents, we appreciate the time that has been expended by this particular committee to hear and determine this matter to its logical conclusion. We are dissatisfied with that particular decision, and in the circumstances, Chair, we shall be requesting for certified copies of the judgment as well as certified copies of the proceedings to enable us advise our client on the available legal remedies. Most obliged, and thank you.
Very well, Counsel. It's a legitimate request. It's lawful. The Secretary is hereby instructed to make that available to you once the same is ready for availability. I thank you.